and I am very happy to be presenting to your club. So let me know if the video or audio needs attention. Otherwise, we'll take a break about halfway through, take a pause. And if there are any questions in the chat, if there are, I believe Sandy will relay them to me. And by the way, there are a few how-to slides in here. I will share a PDF of some of the slides and any slides that have how-to notes. So don't feel like anyone has to take any notes during this. I'm not advancing. There we go. So a little bit about us. Sandy mentioned my husband, Jim. He's the one who got me into photography a little more than 10 years ago. And he's very talented, but he's also my technical support. I tend to focus on the artistic side, and I can be a little bit technically challenged sometimes. So here we are showing off these fancy lenses, but we don't own them. We just rented them for a trip. And we are avid canoe enthusiasts. Jim builds and restores wooden canoes. And we're very active with a group called the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association. So you may see a few canoes in this presentation. And since we don't always have a willing model, we sometimes take along our very cooperative subject. We call him Uncle Dudley. And we like to experiment with all types of photography. So you may see Uncle Dudley in a few images, maybe lending a hand as we explore different points of view. So what do I mean about different point of view? Well, it can be quite literal, such as an image taken up high or down low. You can see here the camera is down inside the canoe. Or with a different lens, which can really add quite a different look and feel to an image. Or by changing your aperture or compressing a scene. Maybe it's using an artistic element like shadows or reflections, or a different technique such as panning. Or shooting through, also looking at the subject with a different point of view. And maybe it's when we look at our subject or even ourselves in a different way. So here are some of the techniques and concepts that I will cover. I'll talk a bit about shadows and reflections, different perspectives, lenses, focus stacking is fun, different types of shoot through, time bending, which means maybe something that warps space a little bit or distorts reality, unusual subjects and wabi-sabi, and a little assignment I give myself: how many ways can I photograph the same thing? And throughout, I'll touch on a few post-processing tricks, and then we'll wrap up with challenge to photograph a concept, which I think is the most difficult. And I do like to start with a little bit of history, because for me, by studying the work of other photographers, I get exposed to many different styles, techniques, and perspectives that it helps me to look at creating my own images with a different point of view. A good photograph is knowing where to stand. Ansel Adams. Obviously, he's the master of finding that perfect point of view. So he really paid attention to the composition of elements in his images. I mean, you can see here, he used foreground elements to create a sense of depth. It sort of invites the viewer to move into the scene. Moonrise over Hernandez is one of his most famous images, but the original image didn't look quite like this. It's pretty well known that Ansel Adams spent about half his time in the darkroom making tonal adjustments to his images. So here he is with two versions of Moonrise over Hernandez, and the one on the left was straight out of camera. The one on the right is after Ansel worked his darkroom magic, much more dramatic. He said, "Dodging and burning are steps to take care of mistakes God made in establishing tonal relationship." So I learned from Ansel Adams that processing is just as important as the photo taking, and I don't think it should be looked down upon. I know many photographers strive to get that image just right when they push that shutter, and I admire those that do that, but I do take a different point of view because I really do enjoy working magic on an image in post-processing. Edward Weston. Cabbage Leaf is one of Edward Weston's most well-known works, and I love his point of view. Take an ordinary subject and turn it into a beautiful work of art. Or find human-like form in a pepper. And then for a very different look or different point of view, there was Irving Penn, probably best known for his fashion work for Vogue magazine. Well, I read that he was born in Plainfield, New Jersey. So was I. Maybe I could get just a smidgen of his talent by osmosis. But he certainly had a different point of view from just photographing beautiful models. At some point in his career, Irving Penn decided to photograph the unusual, the taken for granted. And he did this whole series of cigarette butts, which then later progressed into photographing other junk that he found on the sidewalk. So to Irving Penn, almost everything and anything is a subject to be carefully composed and photographed. He said, I can get obsessed by anything if I look at it enough. That's the curse of being a photographer. And he also said, the greatest privilege I've had in photography is a change of diet. And he loved to experiment with different subjects, different techniques, different points of view. So here he is shooting through a glass wine bottle that's distorted and elongated the woman. It adds intrigue to this romantic scene. And then the image on the right, look at the distortion of the woman in the glass. She's upside down in the wine glass, and she's kind of stretched out in the stem of the glass. So let's get started with the technique of shoot through. So here's quite a mouthful. Shoot through can refer to your subject being partially occluded or blocked by an out of focus element that creates sort of a fuzzy foreground element to your subject. Or it can refer to shooting through a transparent foreground element like a window. And if the object is flat, it can merge a reflected image into your shot. If not flat, it may distort your image. So I'm going to go through these different types of shoot through, and I'm going to start with the subject being partially covered by another object. So here you see that gauzy, translucent foreground. And I'll start with a few examples and then move on to the how-to. But I find that adding this misty veil of color, I think it adds atmosphere, adds some mystery, sort of a misty magic. And I do find that this technique works especially well with flowers. So this is done by shooting through a tulip that's very close to me while focusing on another one a bit further back. So you see the haze of color in front of the subject. So here's a plant attached to a gorilla pod. And the circle in the center, that's my subject. The circle on the left, that's my background. Here's my camera. My camera is smashed right up against the flower. And I'm going to focus on that flower in the center. Okay, so here's my setup. So I'm zoomed out to 150 millimeters. I do like using a zoom lens for this. And I'm using the widest aperture available because I want a very shallow depth of field. The only thing I want in focus is the subject, which again, it's back here, not here. And I want both the foreground and the background to be blurred. So I usually shoot quite a few as just a slight movement of the camera against that foreground flower. It moves that veil of color. So here I like the one on the right the best. So here it is with just a slight crop, a little bit of clarity added to the center of the flower. So while I had everything set up, I said, let me try a few different flowers as a subject. So I think this is just a weed, some kind of weed I found in my yard. And it's attached to something called a third hand tool. It's just basically a small clamp on an adjustable arm. And here is the shot. So again, you see that veil of color in front. Same foreground flower. Now I've changed out the subject flower and I changed out the background flower to yellow. But it doesn't have to be flowers. Here I am. This is a place called Steel Stacks in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It's a former steel factory. And I'm actually focusing on this area back here of rivets and rust. But I see this green leaf and I decide to try to use it as the foreground. So here is a shot of just the structure. And here it is when shooting through the green leaves. And you may like this one better. You may like this one better. Doesn't matter. I kind of like them both. And I tried some other things to shoot through. This is a portrait of our daughter shot through a lace tablecloth. Oh. And a few more examples. So, hopefully you'll get some ideas of things you might want to try. This is a friend of mine in a spring, and she's in this field of spring crocuses. So you can see she's down at the level of the flowers, and she's got lots of flowers to choose for her foreground flowers and for her subject flowers. So the next few shots I took in this same field of crocuses. So this one has a lot of haze, just dreamy, soft color. And sometimes the haze, it can cover most everything, but by just moving around ever so slightly, you can get a slice of focus on the highlight of the flower. And then I was rewarded when this little ant came in and did a dance for me. So another type of shoot through. So basically, I interpret this as shooting through a flat surface like a window, which may or may not include a reflection. There's some fun store windows in this small town, New Hope in Pennsylvania, that work quite well. So here I am shooting through the window, but the window surface includes some reflections that merge into the image. So notice the, electric cables and car, and there's a person on a bicycle here. Same window from a different angle. And this is a bit confusing, but you can tell that the building is the reflection, as the Dunkin' Donuts in the middle there is backwards. So this looks kind of like a double exposure, but it's not. Now, this one actually reminds me more of the original series of shoot-throughs, as it incorporates this sort of subtle reflection that I think merges with the subject and adds some compositional interest. And this one also includes a reflection. You can see the car in the top left, but it also includes some shoot-through texture, some frost on the window at the bottom right. And in this, there's a lot going on in this one, but I like this man up here, a man pushing a baby stroller. And here, what's inside the window and reflected in the window equally fight for your attention and kind of plays with your brain. Like, what the heck are we looking at? Sort of an optical illusion. So this was shot through the window of a taxi in Cuba. And those classic old cars are sometimes held together with duct tape. The one we were in, the windshield wipers didn't work. So the water on the windshield provides a surreal texture. And this one I just shot last week, going over the Ben Franklin Bridge in Philadelphia, again through the car windshield. This one, this was in a hotel lobby, not where I was expecting to find a photograph, but in the lobby there was this water cooler, and I saw the texture of the condensation, and the water cooler was filled with fruit. I thought, wow, that's cool. So the people in the lobby, they thought I was nuts because I'm sitting there on the floor in the middle of the lobby to get this shot, but I like it. Other surfaces to shoot through. This is our shower door, and it has a pretty cool pattern of leaves textured into the glass. I'll try to shoot through it. Well, here's our willing model, Uncle Dudley. I've covered the toilet with a black backdrop. Then I get in the shower and shoot through the textured glass. I zoomed in on just the torso. I think it's starting to look a bit creepy. I zoomed in more. I think this one looks really scary. So let's move on to the last type of shoot through. Shooting through a transparent foreground that is not flat. Think back to Irving Penn's images of the woman behind the wine bottle. Now you see that shooting through the curved surface creates distortion. So this is just a water glass in front of some striped paper. I just Googled stripes and printed it. And by moving the camera up and down just ever so slightly, the shape of those refracted dots would change. So, and one of our photo friends has a crystal ball. So this was shot inside a corn. Oops, I went ahead again. This was shot inside a corn crib at Valley Forge National Park. And she did bring her crystal ball then to another club outing to a cathedral in Pennsylvania. And this is not her crystal ball. This is actually just a clear glass marble. I just put it in front of rainbow striped paper. A different kind of shoot through. So Jim and I have had a lot of fun with this technique. In fact, for a few years, we played with water drops on New Year's Eve. We would drink wine and experiment with all sorts of items. So here are a few examples, and then I'll show how it's done. Plain color, a wire whisk. You'll recognize this as some crayons, a kitchen fork, a scallop shell, candy hearts. And this one I call Flying Martini Olives from Outer Space. It's actually a tangerine. Here you can kind of make out a tangerine, and it's laying on a green bandana. Here you can see the patterns on that green bandana. So here's the setup for this. And if you're interested in this, again, I'll be sharing a PDF that'll have this on it. So don't feel like you have to write anything down. You start with some raised glass or plexiglass. You see we have it propped up on these two white boxes. Wipe some Rain-X on the glass. So Rain-X, you buy that at an auto body shop. That's what makes the water drops bead up. Spray on water droplets with just a spray bottle. Slide colorful objects underneath the glass. Put your camera on the tripod with the lens pointing down. And by the way, it does help if you have a tripod where the arm can come out sideways and you can affix your camera straight down so that the level of your lens is parallel to the surface of your glass. But you do need to be careful. I mean, you look at this could be kind of top heavy here. You do not want your tripod to go boom and fall down. So you see, we've got it weighted down here. So my next tip is a bean bag or weight. You can use a backpack for your tripod. Flash or a bright angle. Here we've got a flash coming in at a 45-degree angle. If you don't have a flash, you can use a strong desk lamp. And you focus on the droplets on the surface of the glass, not on the subject below. And experiment with different apertures depending on the lens. I find that that macro, I think, works best. But I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun. So give it a try. Let's move on to bokeh. Basically an out of focus area in your image. So have some fun with this. Pull those Christmas lights back out of the attic. The size and sharpness of bokeh lights, they change depending on a few things, including how far the camera is from the subject and how far the subject is from the lights. So look at the size of those lights behind this bird ornament. Here, my camera is 5 feet from that subject. Now I've moved the camera closer. Now it's 3.5 feet away, and you see those bokeh lights are larger. I'm going to move closer. Now the camera is only 2 feet from the subject, and you can see how large those bokeh orbs are. So some bokeh tips. A fast lens is best, wide open. Long focal length creates more extreme bokeh. So, and then play around with things. Increase the distance between the subject and the background. Move closer to your subject. I don't understand the physics behind this, so I just set things up and I just keep moving things around. But notice, now I've got a smaller aperture. I'm at f14. Notice that you start to see the shape of the aperture opening, okay? So here's your aperture. And look, you start to see that shape in those bokeh dots. Well, what would happen? Let's change that point of view. What would happen if we could change that shape? What if we shoot through shapes that have been cut out of black construction paper and put it in front of the lens? So here's an example. Put a bunch of examples up there. So basically, here's a blank one. You just wrap this around the front of your lens. So I'd like you to notice the star, the asterisk, and the snowflake. There's the star shape, the asterisk, and the snowflake. Pretty cool, huh? So while our Christmas tree was still up, our dog Shadow was asleep. She had her head on the arm of the couch, and I had cut out a doggy paw print. So I ran and got it, and I was able to get this image of her in front of the bokeh. So, this may look like a Photoshop composite, but it's not. So stars and candles, I think, work quite well. Cut out a different heart shape, maybe, experiment with just different shapes for different looks and experiment. So working the scene, searching for a shot. We've been to the Battle of the Brandywine. It's a reenactment in Pennsylvania. And reenactments, of course, are just great places to photograph, especially if you're like me and you're a little bit shy about asking people permission to take their photo. At a reenactment, you don't have to ask. They'll love having their picture taken. So here I was drawn to this group of sleeping soldiers. Now, of course, this is a really bad photo, kind of looks like they're dead. But when I see something of interest, I'll slowly walk the area, and I'm looking from different perspectives. I'm looking high, I get down low, kind of move to the right, to the left. And okay, now I'm starting to see something that really interests me. And no, it's not the Hanes logo on that soldier's sock. They're supposed to wear fully authentic period costumes. But no, do you see that little brown blob? Well, that's a puppy. So I continue to try different angles, but the grass covers the puppy's head, or all I can get in my frame is puppy butt. Sometimes you just can't get a good point of view. And sometimes you do just have to give it up and move on to the next thing. So same place. I like this woman's hat, so I took a few shots. I'm just hoping to get the right look, the right composition. And I thought I could work with this one. So my finished image, just, some quick editing. I've lightened up the shadows and I brought out the light in her eyes. And in Photoshop, I did add a texture. Let's work the scene at a place called Middle Creek Wildlife Area. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, but just a great place to photograph because in late February, early March, tens of thousands of snow geese, they migrate through here, and they usually stay for a week or two. And with just a little patience and good timing, it's really not difficult to get photos like this of this amazing liftoff of the geese. And here they were taking off like right over me. It was kind of scary. These are the types of shots that photographers come. They come from all different states. They come from all around to get these shots. But for a different point of view, I am always looking around for other visual interests, like this group of Mennonite women who were there enjoying the sights. So I like this shot, but it needs a little Photoshop help. My first step is going to be to bring up the shadows and see if there's a little bit more detail. Yeah, I can see a little more detail in their jackets and detail in the colorful skirts. But there were a few others in the image that were distracting, like that woman on the far left in the red coat. So Photoshop, some content-aware fill, a little clone stamp I used to eventually get rid of the unwanted portions of the frame. Some color adjustments and a few more geese were added. This represents what I saw and felt while I was there. From this to this. And if you do go to Middle Creek, there's this loop road, and I'd suggest you drive this loop road, as you may find surprises out in the fields. Like this one, I just love the leading lines in this shot. And after leaving Middle Creek, Jim and I stopped at there's this huge antique marketplace called Renninger's Antique Market. And we stopped to buy lots of stuff so we could photograph still life. Some of you may know I also do a lot of still lifes. So this gentleman was in one of the booths, and I got up my courage and asked if I could take his photo, and he said yes. Well, my camera was in the car in the parking lot, so I had to run out and get it. But I did a bunch of shots of him, and back at the computer, I'll do some editing. And the first thing I usually look for are distracting elements that I will remove or clone out. So there's this plastic sheeting up here I didn't like, this little pattern on a t-shirt under a sweater. And I found this background distracting, especially this little dot of red. Your eye is attracted to red. These things on the edge, we call them edge boogers. So here's my finished shot. I converted it to monochrome and cleaned up that distracting background. So while I was taking these shots of this gentleman, I did engage him in some conversation. And he told me, he said, I love cats. I've always loved cats. And then he told me, I must have 60 of them buried in my backyard. Oh, okay. Interesting fellow. Okay, so back at the reenactment, you couldn't help but notice this little girl with her wonderful red hair. So I did ask her grandfather if I could take a few shots, as she is a minor and not a reenactor. And she wouldn't stay still, but I captured this sort of fleeting moment. I think she's just probably scratching an itch on her head, but I think it looks like a salute. And I call this the littlest soldier. A little post-processing changed the background from a fairground to a battleground. And then I went back again to the sleeping soldier. I just had to try one more time. And okay, now I like it. I see the puppy's face and the soldier's face. And look, their eyes line up in sort of a beautiful curve that unites the two. So, I'm not happy about that leash or that rope, but I can fix that. That's the shot I wanted. A little puppy love before the battle. Angle of view of the photographer is so important. So I was drawn to this Amish father and his sons, and I grabbed this shot just from normal standing perspective, where we tend to take, 95% of our shots. But then I crouched down low, which really emphasized the size of the wheel in comparison to the boys. And here's a different point of view. It's actually a selfie while relaxing on a windjammer in Maine. And a dreamy shot. I took this from the windjammer of another windjammer going by in the morning fog. But if I get off my butt and move around ever so slightly, I can frame that other windjammer in the opening in the mast for a different look. And while still on the windjammer, we sailed by Bass Harbor Light in Acadia National Park. So this lighthouse, it's been photographed a gazillion times, but usually from the land. The photographers are down here on the rocks. They shoot up the rocks in the foreground and get this lighthouse behind it. But I'm on this boat, so I quickly positioned myself to get a shot through the ship's wheel. I'm pretty confident I have a shot of this lighthouse that nobody else has. Pretty much a straight on shot, looking slightly up at the Brooklyn Bridge. Now I'm looking up higher, and I've tilted the camera to create a diagonal composition, much more angular and interesting, I think. And then straight up with a wide angle lens on Wall Street. How about looking down, in this case from an airplane flying over the Rocky Mountains? Now I'm looking straight down, and I'm on this bridge. I'm looking down into a stream, and I was trying to capture the patterns of the bubbles and the grasses. They were kind of being pulled by this current, and I really didn't get a good shot. I get a lot of failures. But as I'm walking along the bridge, the top of the railing post caught my eye. I went, wow, look at that. So add a crop, a little bit of vibrance, and I thought it made a really beautiful sort of abstract montage of these tree patterns. And I mentioned that steel stacks location in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Since it's no longer a functioning steel mill, it's been repurposed as a tourist attraction, and there are walkways among the structures. And there was this interesting sculpture right outside the visitor center called Optic Wall. And it's made of a bunch of steel tubes welded together. So here's the sculpture, and you can see some of the those decaying steel stacks behind it. But you can look right through the sculpture, and everybody gets a shot of another person. That's Jim looking through the tubes. He took a similar shot of me. But by changing the angle a bit, you only see the insides of the tubes, and now it becomes an abstract pattern. And then Jim decided to place a wide angle lens right on the side of the structure and shoot across it for a really fun point of view. So there are a few images in here by Jim. So when they're there, I do give him credit. Has anyone been to the City Museum in St. Louis? If you have, it's a bizarre place. part architectural marvel, I think part funhouse. It's built inside a former shoe factory. And you can wander and crawl through these labyrinths of tunnels. There are these weird creatures in there. You can climb through giant slinkies. And in the center is this 10-story opening of stairways and these chutes that come down. And then the new owner brought in pipe organs. I mean, just bizarre place. So apparently when this was a shoe factory, the shoes were moved from the top floor down along these chutes. And this was really hard to photograph. It was very dark inside, looking straight up into bright sunlight. So here you can see one of those pipe organs I mentioned. So I'm trying different angles and I'm working the scene and I'm bracketing these shots. Some of the exposures were, pretty long. Here's one of my final images in black and white. This is HDR, but I like this. I think it kind of looks like an MC Escher contraption. I'm still working the scene for another shot and I'm getting closer here. Here, I like these curves, these interesting colored lights. So I decided to try a different angle. Again, I often put a diagonal element. So here it is. This is pretty dark and this is already open at 4 seconds, which is a long shutter speed, obviously on a tripod. But to get some detail inside those shadows, I did another one at 30 seconds. So again, with bracketing, here's the final HDR version. And yes, Jim and I, we climbed to the top and we slid down the 10-story spiral slide. It was like being in a giant chutes and ladders game with eerie lights and organ music. And here's another angle image. This one focuses more on that pipe organ. And now I'm an internationally published photographer, as my image was featured on the front of an international magazine published in England called Organist's Review. I was honored. Okay, so let's talk about macro or close-up, because looking at things really, really close is also a different point of view, maybe a bug's eye view. And when I began my photo journey about a little more than 10 years ago, I knew nothing about photography. And I early on stumbled on some images by a macro photographer named Mike Moats. I'm sure some of you know of his work. And I was blown away. I was just mesmerized by his images. I thought they were just magic. And I found out Mike Moats would be giving a workshop nearby, so I signed up. So the next few images are from that workshop. And he shared all the basics needed to get a good image. And he brought all sorts of fun stuff to photograph, like these clock gears. So that workshop had a huge impact, and I left energized and motivated to really delve into photography. I left with a newfound passion, and a whole new point of view had opened up for me. And one of the things Mike taught us was to shoot straight down on your subject, because it not only creates a pleasing composition, but it does help with getting everything in focus when your camera is at the same, your subject is the same level, parallel to your lens. So in your options of subjects for close-up, endless. I took inspiration from Edward Weston and I started photographing food. So you'll recognize this as a head of cabbage cut in half. But I mean, look at those amazing patterns and twists and turns. And this is some Swiss chard placed on a light box. I just loved the colorful stems. Patterns in a leaf. I think this has sort of a similar look to Edward Weston's cabbage image. And I have lots of images of close-ups of fruit that I include in my presentation on still life. And this was a surprise. This is actually a bowl of chili. It was yesterday's leftover in the fridge with saran wrap on top. I pulled it out of the fridge and the condensation under the saran wrap created these really cool bubbles. So lunch had to wait. I ran and got that macro lens. And with extreme close-up, we can see things we've never noticed before. So, this looks like some creepy figure in a horror movie. Now it's placed inside a stately building and the person is actually sitting. Those are the knees, person sitting on a chair. And now you may never look at the backside of a penny again the same way. I mean, I never knew that's Abraham Lincoln sitting atop the chair in the Lincoln Memorial. And what fun to put on a macro lens and just get out in nature. Because getting close and filling the frame, I think, results in very dramatic compositions. And I intentionally shot this morning glory, of course, on a diagonal. And I was very pleased to capture those tiny water droplets. With a little patience, some lucky timing, you can capture fun images of insects. And I like how you can see the pollen stuck to the side of his leg. A purple anemone at Longwood Gardens. We live close to Longwood. This little fly came by and posed for me. And a different view, looking straight down into the center and filling the frame. And focus stacking. I especially love to try focus stacking with dewdrops, because whenever there's a morning after a rain and the moisture in the air forms these beautiful droplets, I just love to go out and see what I can find. And with just the right positioning, you can actually get refracted image of flower behind the droplets. So you can kind of see sort of this scoop here of this yellow. Well, there it is. That's that flower refracted in the little droplets. And here, all these milkweed seeds were just laying on the ground. I was walking on top of them. But then I looked down and I noticed they were covered in these beautiful little droplets that I didn't notice until I just sat down. I often wear rain pants and knee pads, so I don't have to worry about getting wet or muddy. But for a more controlled environment, you can do this at home. I found this tendril growing on a squash vine and I brought it home and I just posed it in front of a zinnia. So you can see my setup. There are those little water droplets. There's the zinnia behind it. And here's the shot. And you can see the zinnia refracted in those water droplets. So let's take a look at how this is done. This was created by taking many shots of the same subject. And I'll do my best to focus on an area and then just slightly move closer and further away and make many images. So I usually do this handheld, by the way. So the subject isn't always lined up perfectly. I'm moving around a little bit. Sometimes the wind is moving the subject. So notice these 8 images, and most of each one of them is totally out of focus. And notice how they jump around too. This one's on the left side of the frame. This one's a little bit more to the right. But in each image, a portion is in focus. So this can, then you bring them all into Photoshop, and this can sometimes take a few minutes to process, but it's really quite simple. You open them all as layers in Photoshop, select all layers, then 2 steps. Edit, auto align layers. And what that does, remember that thing jumped around? Photoshop magically lines them up on top of one another. And then edit, auto blend layers. What Photoshop is doing there, it says, let me find the portion of each one of these images that's in focus and just use that portion. So the final image is actually a mashup of all the areas that were in focus from all the images. And so it's just a lot of fun to do. So I'm a little more than halfway through. Let me take a pause here and Sandy, see if there are any questions so far in the chat room.
No.
Okay.
We do not have any questions yet. So if anybody has a quick question, you can unmute yourself and ask it. Or maybe
I can continue, and if you can put questions in the chat or just
wait a
hold
minute,
on.
wait a minute. Somebody's speaking.
This is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. That great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I did have a question on your macro lenses. What lenses are you shooting? I'm talking more about your gear that you use for these shots.
That's fine. I believe it's a Tamron 90 millimeter macro lens. Again, Jim is the gearhead. I just say, give me that macro lens, but I'm pretty sure it's a Tamron 90 millimeter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, if there are any other questions, put them in the chat or jot them down and we'll open it up again at the end.
And Betsy, I just want to say, someone has said, actually, it's Diane, our president said, we are just mesmerized. That's why they aren't in the chat room. Yeah, seriously. Yes, I would say just continue.
Okay,
We're learning a lot. And I
I
would
will
say
do
most
that.
of all, I'm feeling very inspired. So
Oh, good, good. Well, hopefully there's a little bit more to inspire.
good.
And with that, I'll move on to lenses. And Jim gave me a fisheye lens, I forget, a birthday or Christmas present. And, I said, thank you. But frankly, I kind of looked at a fisheye as just a novelty. I just always thought it was a lens that makes people's noses look really big. But I started studying other images. And the more I started to experiment with it, I certainly looked at this lens with a different point of view. So this is not with a fisheye. This is a normal lens. This is Hopewell Furnace Park, not far from where I live. A nice place to photograph. And I like to get traditional shots like this, but then I try for something unique. I put on that fisheye, got down low in the grass for a unique perspective, and then I moved that leaf. So here's my finished image, but I love the detail you can get with the fisheye lens. Everything is sharp just an inch away, and you still get sharpness on the buildings in the background. I like all these leading lines, even the contrails in the sky pointing to that red barn. This is Flight 93 National Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. A very emotional experience if you go there. But boy, it's so beautifully done. So this image is of what's called the Tower of Voices. It holds 40 wind chimes representing the 40 passengers and crew members that died when they charged the hijackers. With a slight wind, the chimes create a set of 40 tones or voices, never the same sound twice. It can be somewhat discordant, but it's hauntingly beautiful and peaceful. And in this image, I was actually happy that I caught this plane flying behind it, as I thought that added to the story. But by using a high f-stop and closing that aperture down and shooting into the sun, a starburst was created. And I really like those colorful orbs, those beautiful, colorful bokeh. I think they were caused by dust spots on the lens, but I like them, as I think it represents the colorful souls appearing as the chimes ring their memories. But this is looking straight up the center of that with a fisheye lens. So this is the lens I have. This is a Rokinon 8mm, and it's basically very wide angle lens. So you can see that curved dome. That's kind of similar to the dome shape of the human eye. So it can see not only in front, but some peripheral vision as well. So this is in the chapel at Valley Forge Park. I live close to that. And you can see the distortion, the bending of the walls. The fisheye does that a lot. And if I put the lens down low and point it up, it actually gets all 4 walls in its view. So you can see here, I'm looking straight ahead. Here's the wall to my left. Here's the wall behind me. And here's the wall on the right. And this works great in tight places when you want to open up the area and see as much as possible in your image. An old bookstore in Chester County has really narrow rooms lined with these bookshelves. And if you've been to Antelope Canyon in Arizona, you know that it's very narrow and can be quite a challenge to photograph. So these were both shot at 18mm focal length, which is wide angle, but I wanted to go even wider to really show off the amazing curves. So I shot this with the fisheye lens, which really allowed me to capture more of the amazing structure. And you can see there's Jim with his tripod. We were there a few years back. We understand they no longer allow tripods in Antelope Canyon, which is a shame, as it's dark in there and it's really best to have a tripod. But I finally got him to move out of my shot. And here's my image once I got Jim to move out of my way. And I really like the look when the camera is placed right on the floor, and the floor actually becomes a strong foreground element that guides your eye from the front to the back. And there's a statue of Marilyn Monroe in her iconic pose. This is called the Grounds for Sculpture. It's a sculpture garden in New Jersey. Now, how's this for a different point of view? I put on that fisheye lens and got down on the floor. I do have to give Jim credit. It was his idea, but he was too embarrassed to get on the floor and look up her skirt with his camera. so I did it. These yellow flowers are tiny, but the distortion of the fisheye makes them look huge. This was taken in Maine at Pemaquid Lighthouse, another very popular lighthouse for photographers, but for a different point of view. I made the seagull feather the subject, and the lighthouse way up there, looks very small because of that fisheye, is just a background accent. Place the camera on the ground inside a field of tulips, looking up. Not a fisheye. This is Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. Wonderful place to photograph. We've been there many times. And, you know, the chat at the beginning, Kenny Epps was talking about you all going to a cemetery shoot with people in costume. I wish I was closer. I would join you. That sounds wonderful. And for me, this is the perfect place to bring along a fisheye, specifically to get a different point of view. And this is almost never done standing up. Again, I'm laying on the ground to get this leaf as my foreground object. And you can see how wet everything is. So again, I'm wearing my rain pants because I know I'm going to wind up laying in the grass somewhere. This giant leaf creeping along a rock wall, it kind of looks to me like it's trying to escape the cemetery. And on this one, I just held the camera down low and pointed it up towards this ivy-covered tree. I didn't know what the image was going to look like. So if you can see me here. So I held my camera down low, and I'm just kind of turning it this way and that, going click, 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 moving my camera just ever so slightly, taking lots of shots. And here's the original image on the left, straight out of camera. So I just lightened the shadow areas, and I did have to remove these gravestones. Remember, I told you can shoot all four sides when it's down low. A lot of times you'll get your tripod corner in a shot or your own foot. So I had to get those tombstones out. It's a spiral staircase inside Philadelphia City Hall, taken with a wide lens, 18 millimeters, but with the fisheye that captures even more of those beautiful railings. And this is inside the courtyard at City Hall in Philadelphia. Again, the fisheye is now on the ground, pointing up. The viewer is surrounded by all four sides of the courtyard, while this musician serenades us, playing his flute. And there's an old trolley tunnel in Philadelphia. It's now in the woods. You have to hike almost a mile to get to this place in the woods, but it's got these really cool vaulted brick arches, and the fisheye was the right lens for this. Now that's pretty scary. I laid on the floor with the fisheye pointing straight up and asked my camera buddies to gather around. So, okay, I will add a few images with big noses like this one Jim took. And I did my own. I just really like the bizarre and sort of whimsical perspective you can get. And yeah, of course, we had to make our own goofy images with the big noses. So let's move on to shadows and reflections. Shadows can transform just an ordinary staircase into modern art. Just some curved steps, but I mean, what a difference it makes with these magical shadows. A city pathway, I think it now has depth and drama as the patterns of that decorative fence kind of repeat and stretch out into the path. Wrought iron chairs at Longwood Gardens. Jim looking rather dapper with some dramatic lighting, but the shadow sets the mood. Jim took this at Urban Outfitters headquarters, is at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. You can probably tell this was done with the fisheye lens because you can see that distortion on the building in the back, but what a cool shadow. And this brick building suddenly becomes modern art because of the shadows. And I actually like that accent, that little touch of red down there. And the inside of that corn crib in Valley Forge, very graphic. And this is one of my favorite images of Jim's. He captured this at precisely the right moment, and it's all about the shadows. The foot on the left and the foot on the right, they're raised, showing movement. And the shadow of the little girl holding her father's hand, that's the decisive moment he wanted to capture. I think there's a lot of compositional elements, I think, that make this successful. Of course, the leading lines take you straight down this train station boarding area. The primary colors, the red, the green, the blue, the yellow, lots of shapes and angles, but the addition of the shadows definitely gives an added dimension. At Cape Buffalo in Botswana, the shadow creates a very graphic look to this portrait. And here, I think the shadows sort of enhance and maybe complete this composition. Makes your eye kind of come down around, gives a path for your eye to follow through the image. And of course, one can have fun taking their own shadow. This is at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. So this is an image of a lantern and my feet, and you see the light patterns reflected on the table and the play of both light and shadow on my feet. So now we're doing a little bit of shadow and reflection. And here you see the shadows of these shallow sand mounds kind of shows form. The reflection of the sunrise in those shallow waves provides drama. And the silhouette of the man back by that sunrise, kind of an added bonus. I think that provides impact. So with this, let's transition from shadows to reflections. Sunrise shot, just some beautiful pines reflected in the lake covered with a morning mist. So reflections can be quite literal, just a mirror of your subject. Jim built this wood strip canoe for our daughter Alex, and I just love this magical reflection of those autumn trees. I think it creates a very dreamy scene. And taking pictures from a canoe can provide a unique point of view. Beautiful scene on its own. This is the Jessup Path in Acadia National Park, but I actually laid down in a puddle to get this reflection after a rain. Again, a realistic reflection or mirror image of the subject. But a reflection can take on a more abstract point of view, like these reflections of the remnants of a pier during sunrise. This was actually a mirror image, and then Jim found a little rock and he tossed the rock in the water, and that created those really cool ripples. Or it can be something completely abstract, completely distorting the subject. Very abstract interpretation of a windjammer. And this is certainly a different point of view of an elephant from that trip we took to Botswana. So lakes and puddles are obviously perfect surface for reflections, but so are windows. And you know, how often have we been told that you can't get a good image in the middle of the day with bright sunlight? Well, that's the perfect time for both shadows and reflections. We were on a photo shoot in a little small downtown, and I noticed these kind of funky reflections. I think the glass was old and it must have been warped to distort those reflections. And this bizarre reflection, it looks like a double exposure, but it's not. Cloud reflections in windows. Philadelphia Navy Yard has lots of modern glass buildings like this that are great to get cloud reflections. And this is a building at Ground Zero in New York City. And this was actually taken just a few months after 9/11. And those swirling clouds, both in the sky and reflected in the building, I think represent the chaos of emotions one feels when visiting this place. And the flag at half-mast, I like how it is reaching up to those clouds. And also at Ground Zero, taken quite a few years later, and a reflection in a different surface. The names of the victims of 9/11 are inscribed on the bronze panels of the reflecting pools that are on the original site of the Twin Towers. So when you see here a reflection of the new Freedom Tower, and to me, the image is also a somber reflection of what took place. Not quite New York City, but it could be. I like to experiment with reflections in still lifes by using black plexiglass. And Jim has this small collection of antique cameras. Again, that reflection is on black plexiglass, and we just got that from Amazon. This, of course, is a reflection in a mirror, but her expression seems to me like she is reflecting about some very deep thoughts. And I'll wrap up reflections with this image of Jim enjoying the sunset solitude. So time bending, maybe something that warps space a little or distorts reality. So I also really enjoy photographing motion and experimenting in ways to manipulate it. So this, of course, is a fast shutter speed shot of those snow geese at Middle Creek to freeze the action. But this is what I mean about time bending. By using a slower shutter speed, the movement is captured over a longer period of time. And I love this capture by Jim of one of those snow geese. Here's one that I did, again, with a slower shutter speed. I think this has almost a dreamy or maybe a ghostly look to it. And then here's one more from our visit with the snow geese. For this one, I've captured the motion of the pattern of flight of the snow geese. This is actually about 30 images taken in succession in burst mode and then blended together in Photoshop. So I just stood still, and as the geese flew by, I'm going click, 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 click. But I really like this one as the pattern formed by the birds in flight. Well, to me, this almost looks like a bird in flight. A street scene with a long shutter speed. People in motion take on ghost-like qualities. Or stretch out time with a long exposure to capture light trails from headlights and taillights. And panning is one of my favorite ways to create the illusion of time bending, or a bit of abstract warping of reality. And I love panning. I love to just plop down on the ground and just play with this technique. I just really like that sort of abstract movement effect that you get. So here's a little Photoshop trick to create a similar result. I started with a normal shot of birch trees. And in this case, I added the blur in Photoshop. So this is different than the panning blurs I talked about before, where I was actually moving the camera, because now I have one blurred and one not blurred. And I want to add some of the bark texture back in. Let me just go back and forth a little bit. So you see a little bark texture there. So that's that is done in by bringing both images into Photoshop as layers and just brushing a bit of the texture from one image onto the other. And a real challenge, of course, is to pan moving subjects like cars or cyclists. There's a place called the Velodrome in Pennsylvania, and these cyclists are very close to the camera and me. So the panning has to take place very quickly and like zoom, zoom. And all you see in focus here is this guy's knee. And then you see this explosion of motion in front and behind. And yeah, I got pretty soaked and mud covered getting this shot. But when I saw this dip in the bike trail filled with water, I kind of figured it would make a good panning shot. And you want some really crazy panning? What if you do it from a moving car? You do need two people to do this, the driver and the photographer. And as you drive by the subject, you point the camera at it and swivel or rotate it as the car goes by. I'm going to see if I can demonstrate this for you. So if you can see the back of the chair, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a chair right here. And there's a road going, so this is a tree. The road goes by the tree. And as Jim's driving, I'm in the passenger seat. As the car approaches the tree, I'm pointing the camera at the tree. And as the car goes by, I continue to point the camera at the tree. So I'm rotating it. So it's actually a combination of both lateral movement, because the car is moving by, and rotational movement. So, sometimes it results in just sort of a hurricane of texture and color, but I love this type of photography. But you need patience and be prepared for a lot of misses, because most of them come out just awful. Seriously, I may take about 100 shots before I get one that I like. Or time bending, use a neutral density filter, like what you might do to create that silky look to a waterfall. You can also stretch out clouds. And I think this works really well in black and white. How's this for a kind of an impressionistic look? So this is not a long exposure, but 10 separate exposures. Did this handheld, just slight movement, and then they were brought into Photoshop and blended by using different opacities. I think some cameras can do this in camera. I think the Olympus can, mine can't, so I have to do it in Photoshop. This was done the same way. I just think it adds, a dimension of time and movement. So this is called a night blooming cereus, and I am fortunate to have this plant in my home. And it's a really ugly plant most of the time of the year. It's kind of big and gangly, but a few times each summer, it creates this amazing flower for just one night. So it's sometimes called the queen of the night. So of course, I have to try different ways to photograph this and try to capture this amazing yet fleeting transformation. So I shot it at different times during its progression. It'll start opening maybe 8 o'clock at night. And over the next few hours, it continues to open. And here it is in full bloom. Then I go to bed. And when I come down the next morning, this is what it looks like. It's gone. It's drooped and will not bloom again. So I thought, well, let me try something different. Maybe I can put them together to show that progression in time. And then I thought, let's try a time lapse. So this is something Jim and I kind of experimented with. So I'm going to run this for you. So there's the time lapse. We had to go onto YouTube to figure out how to do this. Now I'm going to show this one more time because we had this all set up and my dog Shadow, the camera's on a tripod. It's taking a shot every minute. Camera's on a tripod. My dog Shadow walks in about a third of the way into this. Here goes, and knocks the tripod. Boom. Did you see it jump? Thank you, Shadow. So that's about 100 images taken about 1 minute apart. And then how many ways? I like to give this self-assignment. How many ways can I shoot the same subject? This keeps me motivated to keep learning new things. And I've done this with quite a few things, but I'll share just a portion of one that I did with the subject being a dandelion. So I'll shoot at different stages of its life, before it blossoms, on its way out, or positioned like a family in a group hug. How about putting them on a flatbed scanner to capture the illusion of seed pods drifting away? Scanography is also a favorite technique of mine. And here are those seed pods flying away to take root next year. Put on that macro lens to get close. And use focus stacking to get the water droplets in focus in front of a soft out of focus background. Or capture a refraction of a distant flower behind it. And look for beauty and composition as its glory starts to fade. Capture it in its state of death, decay, sometimes called wabi-sabi. So wabi-sabi is a Japanese aesthetic. It's a concept that finds beauty, serenity in objects, landscapes, whatever, that are simple, imperfect, usually impermanent. They're dying. So remember Irving Penn and his images of cigarette butts? He was photographing wabi-sabi, and his quote, "That's the curse of being a photographer." I actually think that's the joy of being a photographer. Out on a walk with our dog Shadow, I found this old beat up light bulb on the edge of a river. And I actually carried it home with me for the rest of the walk to bring it home and photograph it. And a vulture egg I found in the woods behind our house, wabi-sabi. After breakfast trash. One person's trash is another person's treasure. And once upon a time, this was a new handcrafted leather seat inside this beautiful canoe. Now it's just tatters and peeling paint. But it was apparently a thing of beauty for the editor of the Wooden Canoe Journal because he chose this image for the cover of the magazine. I was honored again. More wabi-sabi, old rusty saw blades, old beat up rusty tools. And so you like to photograph junk? Go to a junkyard. So this one is not open to the public. Jim and I attended a photo workshop with a great photographer named Richard Lewis. This is located in South Jersey in the Pine Barrens area. And it's just filled with airplanes and cars and, and it's just absolutely full of wabi-sabi. Beautiful lines, shapes, textures, and colors. They're everywhere. I mean, this is just a photographer's playground. And you can move things around or bring your own props. For this one, I took off my glove and placed it where else? In the glove compartment. And there are a number of these white, sort of futuristic looking mannequins, and they get moved around all the time. I placed this one in front of these old rusty tanks, propane tanks, I think, like maybe it was born from one of these pods. And then I found another one of these weird mannequins that had no arms, and I photographed it. And then back at the computer, I was practicing with the new Photoshop selection tools, and I wound up placing the mannequin and repeating it inside another image of the fuselage of one of the airplanes. I was just playing around, but kind of creepy. So you love rust and peeling paint? Well, oh my, I mean, you will find a never-ending wonderland of fascinating, beautiful, rusty, colorful, modern creations, but what to do with them all? Well, how about making a collage for a different point of view? These were all taken at that airplane graveyard. And since we were there with 25 other photographers, we thought we could get some unique shots by bringing along Uncle Dudley. Here he is, ready to lift off in a helicopter. And now he's in the air having a good old time. Back on the ground, he made a new friend. So I'll start to wrap up with what I find to be the most difficult challenge: photographing a concept for a unique point of view. So, and I started with this, maybe when we look at our subject or ourselves in a different way. And I'm going to share a series of examples of images that started in our imagination, and then we had to try to figure out how to create it. This pushes the boundaries of photo creativity. And every year, our camera club has a summer challenge, and each year it has a theme. A few years ago, the theme was song titles. And then there were 10 assigned song titles to illustrate. So one of the assigned songs was Summertime, and this was my interpretation: Summertime and the Livin' is Easy. This was to illustrate the Adele song, I Set Fire to the Rain. Here the assignment was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Well, 2 years ago, the theme was COVID related. Isolation. Get it, photographers? Well, at the time, we thought we had all been recently vaccinated and thought this was behind us. Oh, well, of course it wasn't done yet. But the topics were really ambiguous and very much open to interpretation. Here are some of the topics that we were assigned. So how does one, go about illustrating topics like keep calm and carry on, or this too shall pass? And happy hour, time for a quarantini. Well, anyway, after sitting around a campfire and discussing these somewhat murky topics, and Jim and I had a little bit of alcoholic motivation, well, we embraced the concept and we added our own twist to the challenge. Jim said, Betsy, I'm going to have you in all my images. And I said, okay, but Jim, you have to be in all my images. We could have the other one dress how we asked them to, pose how we asked them to, all within reason, of course. So the wheel started spinning. And over the next few weeks, we visualized, we planned, and we created our version of those murky topics. So this is Jim's version of the assigned happy hour, time for a quarantini. And here's my version of Jim giving it quite a different look by using that fisheye lens. The assignment was the only nation I am visiting this summer is imagination. So I took a trip to the library. I lugged home about 40 pounds of travel books. So this was shot with natural light. I had Jim pose with just the bottom book on his head. It was called 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. I then took a separate shot of the stack of books, and I layered the two images together in Photoshop. And then I just added those butterflies also in Photoshop. All dressed up and nowhere to go. I put an old silk top hat on Jim and had him take out the trash. His response was to have me dress up with pearls and white gloves to mow the lawn. And this is our neighbor's driveway, goes up alongside our property. So I'm doing this and I see their car coming down the driveway. So I ran into the garage and hid till that car went by because I didn't want my neighbor to see me out mowing the lawn in high heels and pearls. And wake me up when we can travel again. Well, Jim has the world's largest collection of maps. Doesn't matter that we always use a GPS. He insists on keeping a paper map of every place we have ever visited or intend to visit in the future. So notice the angle of view. I am down low to get that unique perspective. Okay, 2 more from our summer challenge and we will wrap this up. Destination isolation. Who knows how Jim came up with the idea for this one? And I mean, come on, who rigs up a speed light on a light stand and puts it in their shower to throw a spotlight on the toilet? And the last one, better days will come. When Jim told me I had to get in a trash can, I said, that's going over the line. Our trash cans are too stinky. So he went out and got a brand new non-stinky trash can at Home Depot. And when he set up the speed light during a test shot, we were amazed by this really cool reflective pattern that emulated out from the can, an added bonus. Now, how to get me in the trash can? Well, I didn't fit with my knees kind of bent up in front of me. So I had to fold them up like behind me. And Jim, we put a pillow in the bottom, and then Jim lowered me into the can. After he took the shot, we realized Jim could not lift me back out of the can. So now what do? We're thinking, holy crap, do we have to call the rescue squad to pull Betsy out of a trash can? So the solution was we finally figured out, let's just gently tip the can over, and then he dragged it off behind me. So yeah, we've all gone a bit stir crazy while stuck at home for whatever reason. Maybe smoke from Canada, maybe COVID. We were stuck at home the last couple of weeks when a killer was running around Chester County where we live. But there are so many photo techniques you can learn and try out at home. You don't need to travel. So, if you're feeling a bit rusty, just get that camera out of the closet. Try something new. Don't be afraid to fail or fall down. Just experiment, have fun, and find a new point of view. And I've had fun giving this presentation to you, and goodbye from Uncle Dudley. So thank you. And I do want to show one more slide here. I will send a PDF of the highlights, and it will include this slide at the end. And this slide does have some links to our website with more description of some of the techniques that I shared. You'll see the panning and the swirlies, the night blooming Sirius, some more summer challenge fun. And it does have links to the photographers that I mentioned as well. So with that, I again thank you. I am happy to open it up for questions or comments. Here is our website and my email address, which will also be on the PDF if you don't get it in time right now. So again, I thank you. I will stop sharing my screen. Please unmute yourselves. Sandy, let me know if there's anything in the chat. Turn your video back on and let me know your thoughts.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, my goodness. Betsy, you're just so generous with your ideas and how-tos and your creativity. The images are just spectacular.
Oh, thank you.
And but for me, it's your generosity of what you've learned and you're sharing it with us. So thank you so much. It's really, and in fact, somebody said in the chat, it was one of the best presentations they've seen. So I just wanted to share that with you. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, we will all open up. I've got to change my view. Yeah, there we go. And we're all just turning on, if you want to chat with Betsy, turn on your audio, video, and ask away. And
Yeah.
I have a few that are coming into the chat room, but let's see if somebody else wants to ask.
Yeah, Betsy, my chat room is not functioning quite well tonight, but do you give classes, workshops? I love your versatility.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jim and I have done a couple workshops for our camera club. We've done one on indoor creativity and still life photography, but I'll tell you, it's a lot of work, and so we don't take the show on the road.
Okay. Okay. That's a shame because I would really love to
Oh, thank you.
take a
Thank
class
you.
with you. Yeah.
On our website, we do have some sort of how-to on some of those, kind of bizarre techniques that I talked about. So, you might get a little idea there. Or if you want to try something at home and you have a question, again, that's why I'm sharing my email address. Any of you, feel free to email me, tomorrow, a month from now, whatever, if you try something and you have a question.
But thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody? Question?
I hope I've inspired people to try something new.
Absolutely.
Yes, Betsy, this is Kenny.
Hi, Kenny.
How you doing?
Good.
I just want to let you know, I'm pretty much a portrait photographer and studio photographer, but I just want to let you know I was very much inspired by your presentation. And I'm thinking about doing some creative things similar to what you've done. I just want to let you know I really, really enjoyed your presentation. It was really nice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Will you do some portraits in the cemetery? Or do you do traditional portraits?
Well, I do. I do a little bit of creative portrait work also. So,
Yeah.
but landscaping and macro, I do a little bit of everything. But I mostly stick towards studio portrait work. But your presentation was really great. Gave me something to think about. And the one thing I do like about you is that there's a famous photographer, I think down in Florida. His name is Hirsch. He does photos of Santa Claus. And one of the things he said is that never lose your childlike attitude about photography. And I see that all throughout your photography. So it's great, your imagination and how you put things together. So I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It was really nice.
Thank you.
And Betsy, I want to say that Kenny is one of our mentor right now, and he's been mentoring several of our members, one of whom is Tina, who I see here. She isn't showing her video, but Tina, I bet you are just dying to start. Oh my God, there she is, Betsy, if you can see her.
Hi, Tina.
Hi.
So Tina, you must be motivated, right? I can see.
Yes. Yes, I'm motivated, and I'm happy to see that she takes her skull around with her, because I sometimes take mine with me. And I was just thinking about the work I do with skulls. I was like, maybe I'm getting stagnant. But now that I see what she's doing, because I had just talked to Guy, and I said, I need to do a book on 101 ways to photograph my skull. And he was like, no, don't do that. Because I just took some more skull pictures and I wasn't going to put
I said it was skull drudgery. That's what I
said. But now I'm going to keep doing my pictures of skulls. And you do some of the stuff I do, like the water drop photography,
yes,
the light pad photography. That's all the stuff that I do. And I was so happy to see it, because it lets me know that I guess I'm on the right track with what I like to do.
Oh, that's
Tina, you
wonderful.
are so on the right track. Oh my goodness.
Thank
I just
you.
wanted to introduce Betsy to you, to Tina, who's been
It's nice to
really
meet you.
Nice to meet you, Tina.
experimental. A new
Thank you.
member, relatively new member who's just rocking it. Anyway.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell
Can
you,
you-
I've learned so much from
Oh.
other presentations as well. So I'm glad that you're getting something from mine. That's what it's all
Yes.
about. That's how I've
Yes.
learned. Everything I've learned from someone.
Right, and I use the fisheye as well, but I don't know how to pan. I've been trying to do
Nah.
like panning, but it hasn't been coming out too well for me. But I'm going to
Keep
just keep
trying.
at it and
Yeah.
keep trying.
That's a
Yes.
lot of fun. I love panning.
Yes. That's my next
Great.
project then.
Good.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Another question? I'm getting in the chat room, Betsy, just a lot of compliments, and one said the hour flew by. It did. I mean, it was so entertaining and inspiring for me.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so.
Can you
Anybody
hear me?
else?
Mhm.
Huh?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, so my computer crashed. I disappeared for a while. I don't know if you asked my question.
No, I haven't. Go
Okay.
ahead, ask it.
No, I think yeah, Tina, yeah. Betsy makes me think of you. You make me think, Betsy. I think very creative thinking. And so Betsy, is there something that you do, you and Jim do to try and prepare yourself to open your mind up to be able to notice all these creative images? Is there like, kind of like, do you do like little photographer's yoga or whatever? Stand on your head before you go out.
No, not really. I mean, again, for that last summer challenge, when we kind of dressed each other up and made ourselves do silly things, talking about having that childlike wonder. I mean, how many people our age still play dress up and get in a trash can? Our inspiration for that one, we actually had a little bit of alcoholic motivation. We sat at the campfire. I had my wine, he had his beer. So that may have helped on that one. But we enjoy watching a lot of videos. We listen to podcasts. We're a member of 3 different camera clubs, so we watch a lot of presentations. So we're constantly being fed, and we, seek out YouTube videos and all sorts of things to continue to inspire us, because we both have a real passion for it. So I think that's where the motivation comes from.
I think it's great that you're both photographers together, because my husband couldn't care less.
Yeah, we are really, really fortunate about that. And we
Yeah.
teach each
Yeah.
other, we feed off each other, it's wonderful, especially when you're retired and so many people go, now what do we do? Well, we don't have that problem.
And you have Uncle Dudley.
And Uncle Dudley, we got Uncle Dudley. And poor Uncle Dudley, I don't know if you saw at the beginning, his arm fell off and then he lost a leg. So we actually we now have Uncle Dudley too. We got a new one.
I do have a question I just saw. Oh, how do you sell your work? Do you sell your work?
Not really. I mean, I have sold some. I've been in a few gallery shows, but I've kind of stopped doing that just because I as much as I love photography, I don't like printing and matting, even taking it to somewhere else and having it done. That's just kind of not my thing, and then getting it somewhere. So I sort of migrated away from that. And the place where I share my work the most now is on these presentations. So, I have sold some things, but I don't actively promote it or try.
Mhm. Well, I did mention it in the introduction that I was blown away by many camera clubs you have spoken to, I presented to. I mean, it was a huge list, and I do think you probably win a prize for that.
Well, and like that actually happened because of COVID, you know? I mean, I was doing some local presentations, but when COVID hit and Zoom became popular, suddenly I can present in Baltimore and Florida and, you know, wherever.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm starting to think about ways. I'm gonna probably contact you. I've got another idea.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
good. Well, that's what it's all about, sharing ideas and feeding off of one another. So,
Okay, any other questions? So, Betsy, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been really a wonderful evening. I love learning from you. I love seeing your work. And I think if, you know, the comments and what people are saying here, any indication, you've been a huge hit. You hit a home run.
thank you.
Use a
Thank you
smart
very
metaphor,
much.
which I normally don't do.
Yeah, you can tell I enjoy it. So I thank you all for being a great audience and great questions. And I'll get that PDF out and you can share it. Okay.
Okay, yes, and I will be sending out the PDF and a link to the video once I've got it uploaded. So that's when you will receive an email from me.
Okay.
Good.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
you.
yes.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.